Mm-hmm. That's just a it's just a group research. It's something that if there is a group meeting, right, you guys can get together and talk about it, right? But since last week we were short on time, we didn't really have the chance to have you sit together and talk about the shareholder activism. So we're gonna talk about the shareholder activism in later part of the lecture, right? And you're gonna have the chance to dive into this again, right? But these type of tests are designed to be supplemental to your learning, okay? So if we talk about some aspect, like for example, this week, right, we're gonna talk about subcommittees and board duties. And so you will explore and discuss, right? And this week's group practice is we just dive right into the Theranos case and start looking at things. All right. Okay. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up on the shareholder activism. But we're gonna touch upon this aspect some later part down our course, right? It's a very interesting part. In case actually one of the later group case is indeed on shareholder activism, and so you will have a chance to see that again. Right? Any other questions? No? All right. Okay. So if you have questions, if you if you're not sure about the learning style, because we are doing it's quite different than your traditional undergraduate classes. Undergraduate classes are like exams, multiple choices, and this class is a little bit different. So if you have questions, you don't know how to deal with this type of class, let me know, right? And I'll walk you through. Okay, so let's go to today's. So today's lecture, first part, we're going to talk about the governance in a little bit deeper. So last week, what we did, we introduced the course and overview did the self-instruction, and we briefly discussed what to expect in this course, what you have to do, what are the grading components, and we also talk the major introduction of the concept behind corporate governance and the accounting. The discipline is the agency theory, right? The contract between the principal and agents, right? What are the responsibilities, right? And what are the agency costs? What are the agency problems, right? Because these type of major concept is what propelled the field of accounting as a booming industry, is because all these problems are rooted in the agency theory. So from the agency theory, we particularly want to look at the aspect of ownership, management, and control. Right? Why? Because the nexus of ownership, management, and control is corporate governance. Right? The corporate governance are serving the role as the proxies of the owners to help the owner exert control over the firm, right? To help the management, right, to exercise control over firm's operations, right? So without the governance, right, the ownership, management, control cannot exist, right, in a way that is balanced to help a company achieve its objective. Right? So whenever from this point on, if people ask you, what is corporate governance? Tell me in one sentence, right? You should always think, oh, corporate governance is the nexus of ownership, management, and control, right? And all the major concepts of corporate governance extended from this concept. Okay, it's very, very easy to remember. Ownership, management, control, right? Because now we have learned from our first class, ownership does not necessarily equal management, right? Why is that? The owner may not be managers themselves, right? The owners may be a small owner, right? Does not have the full picture of the operation. The owners may be very wealthy, but do not know much about business. Or the owners may be the management themselves in the beginning, but giving out portion of their ownership to other stockholders, right? But even so, in this case, other people are also owners as well. Things like Tesla, right? Even though Elon Musk is the majority shareholder, but from the governor's perspective, he's just one of the owners, right? Even though he owns the majority share, right? Does that mean that he can control, he has the de facto control of the management? Well, that shouldn't be, right? Okay. How about management and control? Right? It's a different story. The management does not necessarily can have control of firm's operations, right? Okay. If the management say let's start an operation in the Asia region, that's expand very quickly, right? To have this for Pinto, right? Can the management have control over the factory, over its over the course of the economy, can control over the suppliers, right, distributor to help the firm achieve its objective? It may not, right? It may need a steering functions from the board of directors. Yeah, based on my experience, right, in the auto industry, I would suggest you guys to do this. I would suggest you guys to do that, to steer the firm into the right strategic direction so the management can have a better control over its operations, right? So the governance role has a lot to do with all these three things here: ownership, management, control, right? It can come very harmoniously as one, right? But it's actually not a bad idea to separate them, right? Because if you have ownership, management, control all concentrated into one person, it happens from time to time, right? Oh, you guys probably hear that those sometimes you get the business card, right? It says president, chairman, and the CEO. It's like that's especially happens when you meet a young university graduate. He just started the business in his garage, and the first thing he does is printed out a business card saying, "I'm the president, the chairman of the board, and the CEO." Right? But what this implies is that, this person is telling that he has the ownership, management, control all under one area, right? Is that good? It may not be a very good idea, right? Because from what we learned in audit, and case like this is usually is a hotbed for management override, right? For if you ask the management give you false information, and this is particularly rampant. If you have ownership, management, control, all the responsibility crowded in one person or in a very concentrated area, right? So, okay. So today, and then the last thing we talked about last week is the role of governance, right? So today we're gonna talk more about it, right? So ownership, management, control, like we said earlier, control in the sense of the business implies the ability to dictate the course of actions. Like earlier we discussed, ownership does not immediately imply control. So what we want to look into is how do owners exert control over a firm's course of action? How do owners do that? Right. Okay, last week we talked briefly, all right, about Harley-Davidson's case. And we also wanted to focus on, we also talk about Elon Musk's case very briefly. Okay, so let's just take the Elon Musk case, right? So the owners think, right, based on Tesla's situation, that they may think several course of actions. They may think that Mr. Musk should focus solely on Tesla, not jumping around to Boring Company, SpaceX, right? And now he's doing what? Do you guys read the news? He's doing brain implant, right? So owners may think, and there's no doubt you are a wonderful manager, and you happen to be the majority shareholder, right? But you're running around doing X number of different things, right? I don't want this type of manager. I want a manager, a CEO who is focused, right? Okay, they may think that. Or the Tesla shareholders, the owners may think, yeah, we have a great product and you are setting up factories in Europe and in China one after another. Yes, you have the management, you have proven that you can ramp up the production. Okay. You can produce the things that you want to produce. But now I want to see if you are able to change your course of action to produce actual good cars, quality product, not just showing, prove to us you have the ability to mass produce cars, right? You see, a lot of times the criticism toward Tesla is a bit unfair because you see, one of the biggest criticism or biggest doubt over Tesla is, are you able to ramp up production to actually make that many cars to compete with the major car manufacturers? That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That was the biggest question. Okay, as an owner, right? That's the question. That's the type of the question I want answers. Show me, right, that you can ramp up the production. Whether the quality issues is secondary. You can't even make car if you just want to make a boutique shop and make 1 or 2 very finely tuned car. You're a different kind of operation. No, that's not what we want. Okay, so now Tesla is yet another junction of time. They prove they can ramp up the production, and they also proven that their vehicle can be very popular. So the question now becomes, are they able to control the quality of their product to make them consistently good? Okay, not just produce 1,000 cars. I want you to produce 1,000 and 1,000 good cars. Okay, not like 1,000 cars, 500 of them have problems. Okay, so that's one of the stories. Okay, ownership may want to influence or exert control over the firm's course of action, right? So the question would be, if you are a small percentage owner, right, or if you do not have the full pictures of the firm's operations, and how do you exert control, right, over a company like Tesla, right? So we understand that's when governance come into play. We start electing what we call a proxy. Proxy is a representative of you, right? Okay. So you may like a proxy. Oh, this person is retired from Ford or GM X number of years ago. He knows how to make cars, and that he would be a perfect board of director, like to be representative of me, to represent my interest in the company, to make sure the management do no wrong, right? To make sure that my money is protected, right? To make sure that my voices, right, are heard in the company. So that's what a proxy, the board of governors, do. All right. We also talked earlier about the management, although in a position of control, sometimes cannot dictate the course of the business. And that also is when the board of directors, the governance function come into play to help the management, right, way to control, monitor, right, the business's action, the business course. Right. So let's delve into this ownership and control. Right. So from the owner's dilemma, last week we discussed the information asymmetry issues. Right. We understand that the owners may not have the full pictures, okay, of the firm. Okay. So that's what we call information asymmetry. So let's think about it. Now, what are the potential causes of this information asymmetry? Right? In an ideal world, if you own a company, you should know how your company is running, right? How much money your company is making, what's the risk the company is facing, right? But that's not always the case, right? So let's think about it. What are the potential or some of the sources of information asymmetry? Like Daniel, can you give us some potential reasons why owners and management may know different things? Yeah, they may hide it, right? So let's say if you are let's say you manufacture airbags for a car. So this airbag explode in such a high velocity, actually blow out in people's face. Yeah, it saves your life and ruin your face, right? So the management know about this. They may not want to tell the owners. This is a potential risk. If you know about it, then you may have second thought about my ability running the company. Yeah, so you're right. Daniel's right. One of the reasons is that the management may potentially intentionally withheld information, particularly bad news, right? Okay, to the owners, right? Okay, so the owners may not learn what's happening. What else? Okay. So this is yet another kind of case. This potential source of information asymmetry is that the owner may not have the expertise to understand the business operation, only care about the financial results, right? So even though the information is rendered to the owners, right? And by the way, the investors are owners. If you invest in the company, you own part of the company, right? So there's no case that the investor is not the owner. No, it's just owner is in a very different sense. So ownership does not really means that you own 100% of the firm. No. Okay. So yeah, Hu Huang is here in that case. What it's give us is that owners may not have the business acumen, right? They will only want to know the end of the year financial result. What else? Yeah, it is possible. Okay, because sometimes that the ownership can be complicated. You own firm A, but you may own firm B, and A and B are competitors, right? So if you disclose information to A, right, A may have a self-interest, right? The owner may have a self-interest to give that information to company B because he may earn more money through company ownership in company B, right? So that is a very interesting case that, right, the management may selectively withhold information to the owners because the owners have their own self-interest not particularly disclosed, right? All right. So yeah, there are quite a few things. First is lack of disclosure, right? The company is not disclosing the information, right? So even though some things are happening, we don't know as an owner, right? This especially happens with regards to public traded firms, right? Disclosure is happening in several ways: mandatory disclosure, quarterly, yearly, right? And these disclosure follows certain rules, right? Certain items that need to be disclosed. But these are the bare minimum. The SEC say you must disclose. But as an owner, you may think that I'm supposed to know more, right? Okay. So if there's lack of disclosure, then there's big problem with lack of transparency, right? We don't know how the firm is operated. It is in an opaque manner, right? So that's why in this day and age, Twitter is so nice. Why? Because Twitter gives us a particularly different kind of lens into the owner's mind or the management's mind, right? You look at Mr. Trump's tweets, you kind of like, it's so interesting because you get a share of his this bizarre mind and what is he going through in 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, where he's yeah, it's right. And Mr. Musk is the same thing, right? You sort of kind of like a partial picture, right? A glimpse of his personality, right? So even though there's a lack of disclosure, there's still ways for us to discover what is going on, right? So we go through this, the lack of expertise to understand the information. Sometimes even the information is given, right? The owner may selectively discard some of the information because they may see that as irrelevant, right? I don't care about you are making money. I only want to know that you are making money in this product or that product or whatever, right? Okay, and Daniel brought this up. The management may distort the information. Okay. And then there are big problems come from this as well. A lack of a monitoring mechanism. Right? We don't know. Maybe they are thieving, stealing money from the company, but we don't know. Right? Okay. Or, okay, ineffective information intermediary. So the information intermediary has an important role in governance. For example, who are the information intermediaries? Auditors, right? Financial analysts, right? Journalists, reporters. What do is they take a piece of very difficult to understand information and decipher it, right, to their readers. So, for example, when you look at the financial annual reports, now for us accountants, right, you've been through all these courses, you can make financial reports, right? You are in the process yourself, so it may not be that hard for you to understand the financial statement, right? To compare the ratios, right? To understand what is churn, what is turnover, what is all this and that. But for a novice business person, or a person who's let's say, a history major or a liberal arts major, they may not be able to understand what is going on with the company's financial. So you may read this information, provide the company, and interpret it for your readers. So that's what the information intermediaries do. And auditors are the same, right? Auditors are able to selectively inspect the company's transaction, right? And find out if the company's operations or their transactions are of a reasonable level of quality, right, that are free from error due to intentional manipulation or unintentional mistake. So the auditor's role, okay, as an information intermediary, is to provide a level of assurance, right, that those guys are not thieving. Those guys, the financial report they produce are actually of reasonable quality. Right? They say they make money. Yes, they make money. Right? So with that, if this information intermediary are ineffective, right, then the owners will forever live in the cloud. Right? Okay. This is quite interesting because some people prefer to manipulate this, to give distorted information. And we see that on the news almost every day. And I hate to name names, but this is the way how our president operates. He intentionally distorts the ability of information intermediaries, right? So the information that is given, may be false or maybe not trustworthy, and he knows that. That's exactly what he wanted. Because if the information intermediaries are corrupted, are ineffective, then nobody knows what the true self of him, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's usually quite effective, because now we have learned this new trick from Mr. Donald Trump. It's if there's no effective information intermediary, you can always claim everything that you see out there as fake news. Anything negative is fake news, right? The auditors say this company is doing fraud. Oh, it's fake news, right? Or the Wall Street Journal wrote about Theranos and this and that, and Theranos can now say, oh, it's fake news, because you are not an effective information intermediary, right? So that's why this is important. I have always been in the audit industry, and I always told my students or my employees, the integrity, right, of you, that's the most important asset, right? Is the integrity of the auditors, because that's how you make money. How much people can trust your opinion, trust your workbook, trust your ability, right, to certify certain things, either the financial statement or transactions or an operation of the company, right? Okay, so the role of governance in terms of the control, that's what they do here. The governance umbrella, as you can see, it should cover the strategic direction to help management exercise control over the firm. And on the other side is the government's oversight to help owners exert control over the management, right? All right. So the controls, now we realize, is control is actually actualized, realized through proxies that would provide strategic directions, the government oversight, and providing that structure through which the objective of the company are set, right? Because we need these two things. That we need the strategic direction, the government's oversight, right, to bring together the ownership, management, and control, right? And after that is done, we know that the objective of the company can now be achieved. And so the governance can first, right, provide the structure through which the objective of the company are set, and also the means to attain those objectives. Okay. So in this sense, that the proxies of the owner is therefore endowed with what we call the fiduciary duty. Okay, it must represent the owner's interest. Let's just take this as an example. Right, let's say Megan go out there and bought a lottery ticket and got, let's say, 20 million, a lot of money, good money, right? So Megan think, oh yeah, I took Professor Lee's course and he seems like he knows his stuff. So I'm gonna start a company and ask Professor Lee to be my proxy to see whether the guys are doing things correctly. So now I become a proxy of Megan. Okay, I become an elected board of governors, not elected, appointed the board of governors, appointed by the owners. So now I have duties to represent Megan's interest. Right? I should act on Megan's behalf, right? To make sure that Megan's money is spent wisely, that Megan can get a return, or even if the company is to produce a loss, that loss, right, can be explained, right? So Megan may be somewhere in Spain on the beach, right, enjoy her margarita, right, and while I am her proxy, right, overseeing her investment. So yeah, although that board of directors, from this perspective, it seems like it's a very respected profession, a very high-level profession, but it does not necessarily mean that I can just, enjoy the position in the coast, right? I have my duties to perform, and these duties, right, is what we call the fiduciary duty. So fiduciary duty comes from the word fiducia. Do you know what that word means? It means trust. You are entrusted by the owners that you are an able person to represent his or her interest. Okay, so more on fiduciary duty. Okay, the fiduciary duty is the duty that the directors and officers owe solely to the corporation and the shareholder collectively. We don't know anybody else. The fiduciary duty says we owe solely to the corporation and to the shareholder. Okay, and this is written in corporate law. No, so you don't need to really worry about it's just what professor said. No. It's corporate law says this. So some of you may notice this already, right? Where's this the society come into play? None. And in corporate law, as a director, as a board of directors, your responsibility, your fiduciary duty is solely to the corporation and to the shareholder collectively as a whole. Right? You don't owe the government anything. You don't owe the city. You don't owe the society anything. Only if that, by doing certain things that the corporation or the shareholder could potentially be damaged, right? And then we will consider, right, some issues to the society, some issues to the other stakeholders. So the board of directors' fiduciary duty includes the duty to exercise care, in the management of corporate affairs. Right? Just like I said earlier, you can't just take the money and coast, right? Enjoy the position and the title on your name card. No, you actually have to exercise care. Right? The company is thinking about, right, producing a new line of product, right? Okay. Or the company is thinking about merging with another company, or the company is thinking about acquiring a major the intellectual property. Okay? Right. So as a board of directors, we may want to exercise care, right, in some things like these corporate affairs. And then the duty of obedience. Okay, that's associated with the trust. Okay, you have a duty of obedience towards the owner because you are a proxy of the owner. Right? You may challenge the owner's directive, right? Give your own opinion, but you have a duty to obey because you are a proxy. Right? If you don't want to obey, you can quit. Okay? But if you are chosen to be a proxy, right, you have a duty of obedience. Okay? The duty of loyalty to the corporation, okay, and exercise the power of the office solely for the benefit of corporation, its shareholders. All right. So you may see these things as read very vaguely, but you may be surprised. A lot of shareholder lawsuits or shareholder sues the board of directors, right? Or the director found themselves in breach of trust are the lawyers trying to find these four things. Do they breach any of these fiduciary duty? It's usually very interesting lawsuits because it's hard to prove these things, right? So fiduciary duty of due care. So due care is a very interesting concept. Okay, due care says that to exercise the same care in the management of the corporation's business as a prudent man would exercise under similar circumstances. Right. So what it's saying is that if you were a executive of GM, right? If you were an executive, let's say Ford Motor Company, right? It is in your capacity to understand the automotive industry, right? So when you are advising Tesla, right, you should be able to provide certain level of guidance that is prudent enough as a person who has served in major automotive industry, major automotive functions, right? Okay, so that's what a due care is, right? Are you able to provide the due professional care, right, that is afforded to your client or to your principals based on your experience, based on your expertise, right? Because you are selected to be this proxy of the owner. Like Megan select me to be her proxy because she trusts that I will exercise due care when I look after her company. It's the same thing that you try to hire a nanny. That a nanny is supposed to exercise due care, right? A reasonable level of a professional care to taking care of a baby, right? You're not going to give the baby a piece of steak, right? The baby can't chew, right? You're not going to ask the baby to, right, to cook a meal himself or herself. No, right? That's what due care is. Think, if you have understanding due care, think about nanny, right? You can't be there taking of your baby. The baby is the corporation, the company. You don't know what the company will do. They're just babies. So you find a nanny, right? Okay. But don't. I know it's more illustrative concept, but if you people are talking about governance, you don't say this. Oh, it's kind of like nanny. No, don't do that. Right. So they must use their uncorrupted business judgment, free from undue influences, for the sole benefit of the corporation. Right. So earlier that Anna brought up the case that the owner or the board of directors may be sitting on different boards of the company. I may sit on Ford, yet in the same time I sit on Tesla because I'm just the captain of the industry, right? So I get to sit on multiple boards of an automotive company, right? So when I'm giving my advice, right, to the corporations, right, there's potential conflict, right? So the due care as this fiduciary duty says that I must render, must use my uncorrupted business judgment, not because that I have other interests out somewhere, so that can influence my decision over here. So these are important concepts: uncorrupted business judgment, free from undue influences, right, for the sole benefit of the corporation. And due care says that we must provide the care to one's best ability, okay, as a prudent person. Okay, and this will involve the concept of a breach of fiduciary duty. So that means that involves a willful violation. And the key word here is willful. A willful violation of the duty imposed by law on the fiduciary into a particular relationship. A cause of action does not require as one of its elements a showing of fraud. So, you see, when it comes to breach of trust, breach of fiduciary duty as a governor, as a board director, right, it does not need to be fraud. If it is anything here that you try to mislead the owner, right? Okay? Or you are acting on someone else's behalf, not in the corporation's best interest, okay? You may be found in breach of fiduciary duty, even though no crime is committed or no crime is proven, right? A board of directors may be found in breach of fiduciary duty on the grounds of that unable to do these set of things. So more on other duties. So we understand that board of directors provides direction to the management, empowers them to take actions. But in addition, board of directors must also identify key stakeholders and understand their needs. Okay. Okay. To achieve its job and go through his day-to-days, right? So day-to-day governance is executed by the management, typically through risk management activities to see that the operations are governed through internal control, that risk management activities. And the internal external auditors will provide the board and management with assurance with regards to the governance activity. Let's say we want to, let's say, just take Tesla as yet another example. So recent things development in Tesla is that they just purchased a land in Austin. They're going to most likely build the Cybertruck over there in Austin, Texas, right? So not several things have happened. Okay, they have promised that Cybertruck will come before the end of next year, right? So the owners want to see that happen. The management also want to see that happen. But who are able to give the assurance that things will happen on track? That's the internal external auditor's job, right? To make sure that these operations are on track, okay? And happen as the company planned to be. So let's come back in 15 minutes, and the come back 3:15 will go over the concept of governance and stakeholder. We always talk about stockholder up until this point, right? We understand that the governance has a fiduciary duty towards the owners, towards the stockholders. But now we start looking at the stakeholders' perspective, right? And that comes in the next lecture. So come back at 3:15 and we'll continue. All right, let's come back to class. All right, let's come back to class. I know you have a nice room there. All right. So next we're going to consider governance and the stakeholder issues. When we talk about stakeholders, there are general three kind of categories of stakeholders based on their the proximity to the organization, to the company. So first we have a direct stakeholder. It is directly involved in the operations of the business. This includes management, the employees, and sometimes people will see customers as a direct stakeholder because customer pays for the company's operations, right? To sustain the company's profit, right? But some people may see customer does not involve directly in the operations, so some scholars may categorize customer as an indirect stakeholder, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, it's just there's no really strict category. It's just see how far they are to the company's operation. So when it comes to indirect stakeholders, they are not directly involved but affected by the outcome of the business. So this may include the society as a whole, the resident of a city, like for example, the resident of that small city that Tesla going to build the factory, right? If they become a good factory, if the Cybertruck sells well, right? That city may benefit as a result of a company's operation from tax income, from the local real estate, right? From the jobs that bring in, okay? Because of the success of the operation, because people need to eat there, people are moving in there, right? Okay, so there are also something called influencing stakeholder. Influencing stakeholder will influence aspect of the business, and as a result, the success of the organization. This may include policymakers, politicians, right? We've seen that in this day and age quite often, right? There's some things that the politicians say, right, may directly influence the company's operations, right? And sometimes that these type of things, the government try to write into the law that as an influencing stakeholder, you should not do certain things that directly benefit yourself, right? Like right now, you're probably seeing a lot of discussion on Hatch Act. You guys seen that? It said as an influencing stakeholder, as a government politician, right, you should not erect certain policies that would benefit yourself, right? That's the core of the Hatch Act. So when it comes to stakeholder and stockholder, okay, it is very, very difficult. This is one of the most difficult job of the board of director, is to balance the stockholder and stakeholder needs. And it goes even deeper, okay, than just business. It has a lot to do with the psyche of a society, right? So in capitalism society, right, we tend to see that the role of governance should be towards the stockholder and stockholder only, right? Okay, because in capitalism we see that society is driven by capital investments, by money, right? But in socialism countries, it's a little bit different, like Canada, Australia, or the majority of European countries. They see that the stakeholder, the society, is the force that driven the success of a company. What they see is that if the society does not have a good employee, does not have a rule of law, right, does not have a stable infrastructure, the company would not be able to become profitable, right? So they would see stakeholder influence to be more important than the stockholder, the owner. the socialist country tend to see the stockholder as a leech of a society's success, right? So it becomes very, very difficult as a board of directors for an international company because you have to juggle, to balance between the stockholder and the stakeholder needs, right? So one of the most interesting example is this guy here, Martin Shkreli. I have a hard time pronouncing his last name, right? So he's apparently the most hated person in the world. He's the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. And how did he earn this dubious title? How many of you guys here do you listen to Wu-Tang Clan? Wu-Tang Clan? Any fan, Wu-Tang Clan fan here? Oh, okay, so Daniel, you're a Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah, something like that. Because he could. So one thing that he did, right? He's a very flamboyant CEO. And one thing that he did that unrelated to this all this pharmaceutical thing is that he bought out the Wu-Tang Clan's one single, right? Paid $2 million to Wu-Tang Clan so he can own that song and not release. And just become his private collection. Only people only get to listen to that Wu-Tang Clan song if you're in his apartment. And Wu-Tang Clan was like livid. We make music so people can enjoy it. And you this asshole just bought the song, and so you can keep it in your own private collection. What the heck is that? Right, that's one of the things he did. Just give you a preview of his personality type. So what he did is that he become a CEO of a pharmaceutical company. So he take a look at his company's portfolio, right? The products. You notice that company is producing a particular drug, right? I think it's called a Daraphan, right? And you look at this drug, you say, oh, our company is the only company to produce this drug, right? For a particular lung disease and pneumonia, very specific type of pneumonia that is only needed for a certain type of HIV patients, right? So he thought, now we are the only company producing it, and you're selling it for what, $15 a pop? Nah, that cannot be. So overnight, he raised the price of that drug from $15 to $752 overnight. So from your perspective, you may hear like, well, this is outrageous. How can he do that? You make drugs to save people's life, but from the corporate governance perspective, the owners were very happy with him. Why? Because he made the right decision to protect the stockholders, the owners' interest. Right? They love him. He's a corporate darling. Right? Right? But from the stakeholders' perspective, oh no, this cannot be. Right? So from the corporate governance perspective, so where do you draw the line? Right? Where do you draw the line? How much is too much? Right? Can we allow jerks like this to continue to exist, to run corporate America? Of course. This is just an extreme example, but people like him, they flourish, in the corporate world. Because they did the right thing to protect the stockholders' interest, to make sure the company become profitable. If the company have an exclusive right on some things, that's profit on that. Okay? Right, so let's just take down a notch because this may be too extreme. But it showed you a perspective of, what the corporate government is supposed to do when you are balancing stockholder needs and stakeholder rights, right? Because you see, what we're seeing here is that doing good does not always make money, right? So recently we start to see more attention and focus on what? Corporate social responsibilities, right? What does it say is that as a corporation, you are a citizen of the society, right? Therefore, you have certain level of responsibility, right? Must pay towards the society to ensure that the society move towards the right direction, right? A healthy direction, right? It's not just try to benefit your own owners at the expense of others, right? Like Mr. Martin Shkreli's example, right? He's killing those particular patients, paying that money, right, to benefit his stockholders. And there are also environmental issues, right? Okay, how much are you willing to pollute or to save money, right, on your operations to make your company profitable, right? Before it's too much, before you produce too much impact on the environment. How much is too much, right? It is expensive to make sure that your operations are carbon neutral, okay? But how much is too much? Okay, and for this, you guys have to understand that the carbon emission and the whole carbon trading scheme is not just about like how your operations can produce the greenhouse gas. No. So it's from your operation. So let's say even Tesla, they make emission-free cars, right? But in their operations, they make what? Paint. They paint the car, right? They make those aluminum, right? They produce chairs, right? They make cars with different colors. So in the course of their production, right, they cause greenhouse emission, right? Okay, so these greenhouse emissions supposed to have a quota, right? Restrict how much greenhouse emission a company's operation can produce. So if you're producing too much, you must buy quota from some other company. So that's the whole thing about greenhouse emission or greenhouse gas trading scheme, right? And the whole thing is surrounded by the environmental issues, right? So corporations may have the motive to switch their operations to third world countries, to countries with less regulations, right? So their operation can be cheaper, right? So there are less regulations on emission or on protecting the environment. So they do not need to answer their stakeholders how much the company is doing, right? Or even LGBTQ rights. And now it's very, it's become some kind of buzzword, right? The woke culture, right? Okay, and things like this, they don't. And one thing interesting about this new millennial generation or after the millennial generation Z is that we smell bullshit right away. So when companies trying to produce like as if they have they stand behind this LGBTQ rights, and by producing some kind of commercial like the Pepsi thing, remember with the Kyle Jenner, is that Kylie Jenner, something like that? You hand a Coke to some kind of riot police or whatnot, right? And people smell bullshit right away. You know, it's just some kind of those woke commercial, right? Yeah. Even movies, you know, the whole thing about Star Wars, right? People hate it is because too much wokeness in it, right? People smell that. Okay, or even labor abuse, like the case that we're looking at, the Foxconn, right? Okay. So these focusing on these issues, they are very good from the stakeholders' perspective, right? But they do not necessarily produce the result that stockholder wants, right? Because these things are expensive. This thing doesn't really necessarily make money, right? So how do we balance that? Okay. But corporate governance must not forget their fiduciary duty is to the government, to the owners. Okay. So the board must balance and justify its mission and exert its duties, not blindly follow either the stockholder or the stakeholder. That's what we want to see. Right? Yeah, I understand the stockholder wants to make money, right? But if you're making money in such a way, right, it may harm your corporate image, right? It may harm your company as a whole. So the governance functions, you should be able to stand out and say, yes, you may be able to produce some kind of short-term benefit, but long-term, right, this may not be a good idea, right? Okay, so this become either a bigger issue in corporate America or in public traded company. And Anna brought up this case earlier that owner may be what we call a transigent owner. I may just own this stock for this company for a year. I just want, when I own this company, the company can make a profit. And then I'll sell this company's stock. I don't care what happens down the road. So when you are owner like that, is what we call the transigent owner. Okay. And you have a horizon issue in front of you. So in that case, that the board directors may have to consider, my duties to the corporations, right? Okay, and the stockholder. But my duties, ultimate duty, is to the corporation and the stockholder as a whole, as a collective, not just certain transigent owner. Okay, so as an owner, even for, let's say, Elon Musk is the largest majority holder, right? He cannot necessarily dictate the board of directors to do his own bidding, right? Because the board of directors' loyalty is to the corporation and the entire body of stockholder as a whole. Okay. All right. So next, let's think about the independence of the board. We start thinking about these issues, right? Okay. First, we look at is something called the interested director transaction. Okay. This is a key word here, interested. Interested, that means that you have a stake in it. You're in someone's pocket. It's not the word like interesting. Oh, no, whatever. No, it's very different. Interested. That means you have an interest in it. Okay. Usually the definition is that the transaction between a director and his corporations, or between the corporations with the common directors, they will raise the question whether the interested director has complied with his fiduciary obligation to place the interest of the corporation ahead of his own. Okay. So earlier we discussed the case that a board of directors may advise on two competitors, right? Or a directors may own certain companies' shares, right? And then in the same time, be the board of directors. Like for example, if I myself, let's say I own 60% share of this company, and because of this 60% voting right, so I voted myself to be the chairman of the board, right? So therefore, I can exert my own influence to benefit myself. Okay, and case like this happens very often. Why? Sometimes that the owners do things in a certain way to intentionally, right, bring the company down to a point so the company become a acquisition target, right? To set the company for sale, right? So for small percentage of owners, they think, oh, my stock is going down, right? Nah, I don't see a stock dividend because the company is not making money, right? But as a whole, what happens, the majority shareholder is that they can reap the benefit from selling the company because they own a large percentage of the share of the company, right? Okay, so in this case, what they are doing is they are placing their own interest ahead of other owners, right? And this kind of case has become quite complicated. It's hard to prove, but usually it's a very good material for corporate governance. Do you guys ever, how many of you have HBO? Not many, eh? Okay, so Roma, you have? Did you watch the show called Succession? Yeah, Succession is discussed this one of this case. They intentionally bring the company's operation down to set up company as an acquisition target because from the sales of the company, the benefit can benefit, the family can benefit. You know, it's quite interesting. Okay, so how do the boards getting paid to remain independent? How are you going to pay the board of directors? Not paid at all? Should the board of directors getting paid? Can the board director be getting paid through salary or getting paid by stock options? What do you guys think? Yeah, that's right. How about gifts, travel, hotel, Disneyland vouchers? Can they pay this way? You mean the answer may surprise you. You know, among these three things, right, the most acceptable way for directors to get paid is the third. It's the third. You go to the meeting, the board of directors meeting, right? You get paid by the time you participate in that meeting, per time, right? And when you go to the meeting, you get some of these, the gifts, travel vouchers, hotel stays, Disneyland, right? Cruise ticket, right? Those are things that are unrelated to the firm's operations, right? But it seems that as perks, right? But these type of first of all not paid at all, then the board of directors do not have motivation to protect the owner's interest, right? The second one, the salary or stock, is what happens is that when the board of directors are getting paid by the management, they are aligned by the management, right? They are in the management's pocket. Okay. Yes, Daniel. Yeah, you have to render the fair market value of those gifts and declare it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But this, you get these gifts in a direction in exchange for your performance. So it's considered as compensation. Yes, because those are, when you're talking about compensation, the concept is exchange. You are providing certain service or products in exchange for certain things. If you don't do that, you don't get these, right? So even though they are called as gifts, but from the tax law perspective, they are not gifts; they are compensation. Okay, right. All right. So it may surprise you, eh? Actually, the third one is the most acceptable one among these three, right? And we get that all the time. And I used to be. Let me show you something. Hold on. Some of you know I still sit on the board for some Japanese company that I used to be. So a few years ago, I got this a very nice GPS solar watch. So what happens is that it's powered by solar energy and it has a GPS in it. So it doesn't matter which time zone I'm in, the time will automatically adjusted to the correct time zone and its accuracy to the second. So this is like quite a show. So there's 15 of us, right? We all got this watch, and every one of them, the time is exactly the same, even to the second. It's quite interesting. It's one of the gifts we got as the board member. All right. So the actions for the governance. The board action is exercised through various committees. That's how board do its job, through committees. Okay. So board will attach to governance committees, like for example, audit committee is one of them. They communicate to the management the board expectations and identify and manage risks That's what those committees do. And there can be many type of committees. The key steps of these is first we'll establish a committee charter and mission. Let's say you have a strategic steering committee. You will establish this committee with certain important members and declare your mission, right, in this committee, right? Like for example, in Congress, you also have these sort of committees, right? The Judiciary Committee, the Armed Forces Committee, all these committees, each committee have their own job, their things to oversee, right, and their mission, okay? It will demarcate the responsibilities and the boundaries, what the directors do, what the management do, right? And it will articulate the reporting requirement, what need to be reported to these governors, to this board of directors, in order to inform the owners, right, what is being done, okay? And also to reevaluate the process on a regular basis. So from time to time, they will check whether these committees are serving its job correctly, whether the management need a different monitoring process to make sure the things are doing right. Okay, so your research task this week, do it yourself, is to research various governance actions through their committees. Okay, Audit Committee, what did they do? Strategic Committee, what did they do? IT Committee, Corporate Social Responsibility Committee, Innovation Committee, right? Okay, so kind of quickly look into it. It's usually company will send out a PR, a press release, or setting up whatever committee in the board do overseeing certain things, right? And recently, a lot of committees popping up are these CSR, the Corporate Responsibility, Social Responsibility Committee, and the Innovation Committee. These are very popular nowadays. Okay? And sometimes the committees can have really weird, bizarre names. So your research task is to just look around, you know, what committees a company are setting up, right? But by looking into their MD&A, and their annual reports, or by their press release, okay? So it will give you a hint, okay, what they are trying to do to enforce certain actions or certain directions of the company, right? So why are these committees set up? Hint, again, is ownership, management, and control. They want to consolidate this. What does owner want? What management should do, right? How do we control it? So that's for the first session, and let's move on to the second session. Do we want to take another break? No. Okay, let's just move on to the next session. The next session is will be done rather quickly. Let's see, bring up the slides. Right, so this session, we're going to talk about the report on the corporate scandal. So we already touched upon some of the things that we're going to discuss in the beginning of this course. So we're going to just skim through information here so you will know what you have to do for your group assignment and for your individual research. Okay, so the research is to find a major corporate scandal you already know, and most of you have already started looking into it, right? And the first task you have to do is to research the facts about the case, okay? And then discuss the impact, analyze the corporate governance issues, analyze internal control weaknesses or lack of control, right? Presented in the firm's operation beforehand, right? And research the remediation effort from the owner, from the principals, and also from the stakeholders' perspective, what's being done to remediate the after effect, right? Okay, so right now we're here, the research, the fact about the case. And throughout this course, week after week, we'll go over these things. So you will know how to write it, how to address it, right? That's usually an approach. Okay, so the research target. Must it involve fraud? No. Corporate governance issues arise from breach of trust between the ownership and management. We've seen that. There are many, many cases, and we talk about the nature of this trust and the conditions that these trusts can be breached, right? Okay. So as long as you're seeing that there's a breach of trust, it can be written as your research case. But this type of breach of trust is harder to find. So that's why we start with a corporate scandal. Because when it gets to the stage of a corporate scandal, right, it becomes quite obvious and blatant what's wrong with the governance, right? And what's wrong between ownership, management, and control, right? So if there's obvious fraud, right, it would be easier for you to research. But based on what we learned in the first hour, we know the problem with corporate governance sometimes does not need to arise from fraud, right? Must it involve the accounting manipulations? No. Okay, from the corporate governance perspective, accounting is a device to mask or to hide the underlying economic effects. So when they have committed some dubious acts, right? If they try to hide it, try to report it differently, try to disguise it, they will use accounting as a device to do that, right? Okay, they try to steal money, right? And when money is stolen and they hide it through different kind of accounting transactions or devices or set up like subsidiaries and this and that, right? So this course is bigger than just accounting issues. So there's not necessarily need to be involved in accounting. But some of you already have cases that are based on accounting scandals. That is fine too. And the next question is big or small? We talked about briefly, right? Big, well-documented cases are a good start, like Enron. It's a very, very big case, right? But you may be facing a mountain of material to go through, too much to read, right? And it's hard to siphon through all this material, right? to find what is relevant to what you want to write. Right? And it can be difficult because when others have written so much, it's difficult to find your own voice amidst so many of them. Okay? Okay. Right. So fact finding. How do we do that? Okay. First is through mandatory disclosure. Mandatory disclosures are the financial reports, quarterly reports, right? Or by law, that what is need to be disclosed is required by the regulators. It produce the first-hand information, okay, because it's from the corporation directly, right? But it may not reveal the complete picture because mandatory disclosure are the bare minimum requirement. By law, what need to be disclosed. Okay? There may be more information out there they do not try to disclose. And the mandatory disclosure usually happen in the interval. So there's a delay between when things happen and when things are disclosed. Okay? So what happens with that is when things are eventually disclosed in their quarterly or annually, you get a compounded information, right? That is include not just when it happened in the impact, but also include the things they try to muddy up the things. Oh, we did this to make it better. Oh, no, the impact is remediated or that. Okay, that usually happens when the mandatory disclosure. The company try to find certain information to lessen the impact of the bad news. Okay, so to make it a compounded information. Right. Next one is for voluntary disclosure. The company will volunteer some information to grant interview to a major news organization, or to send out a press release, or CEO come out and say I'm sorry, things like that. These things are not required by law, but they volunteer these informations. right? But the problem with volunteer disclosure or voluntary disclosure is I often involve motives of sending a specific signal to the public. They only volunteer information because they want a certain impact, right? Certain effect to be achieved. Or why do they just come out and say certain things like they do? Yeah, there's a motive behind them, right? So the information may be cleansed already, as it may already come from lawyers, corporate counsels, or PR department, right? So that's a problem with voluntary disclosure, right? Okay. So from the information intermediaries, this may include auditors, journalists, interested third parties, financial analysts. Okay. So with information intermediaries, you have to understand that information intermediaries are, by nature, they are dealers of truth. The key word here is dealer. Right? What does that mean? So facts are discovered or reported as a condition of a business transaction. You are getting paid to do that, right? You're an auditor, you are getting paid to produce an audit report. You're a journalist, you are getting paid to write an article on certain things, right? Okay. So they are serving as a function. They deal the truth to fulfill, okay, their end of business transaction. Okay. So reports are often written to satisfy their readers, and we must beware of something we call the yellow journalism. Do you guys know the term yellow journalism? So Daniel, you heard this term. What does that mean, yellow journalism? Yeah, it has a long history behind it. So yellow journalism comes from in the old days when the printing press, which has happened, right? So what happens is that ordinary newspaper are printed on some shitty gray paper, right? Right. So when they have something big news, sensational things, right? They print it on a yellow piece of paper to get the attention. Yeah. So you see that the little, boys and riding their bicycle, holding this yellow piece of paper, so people will know that it is something to be, to pay attention to. Right? And things like that start evolving because there's more and more things in that yellow piece of paper become what we know later as those tabloid type of journalism. It just sensationalized a piece of, useless information. So you need to be aware of that. A lot of times that editorialized article, right, may include too much of the opinion in it. Okay, so next what we have is what we call adjudicated or arbitrated facts. Okay, and these are the facts discovered or recorded after a court ruling. Okay, so these is quite good because they usually come from first-hand information. Somebody have to get on the witness stand and talk about it, talk about their experience in it, and somebody to swear that they don't lie or they will be found perjure themselves. So these are usually final. The information contained in the adjudicated or arbitrated facts, they're final and the most reliable. Right? Because they have been argued in court. Okay, and facts are presented through what we call the discovery process, and are presented to the court with the rule of evidence are preserved. Right? So we know that they are not manipulated somewhat. These evidences are considered have a power. Right? So court filings are public records. Okay, you can always find it. It can be difficult, though, to wade through the prosecutors and defense lawyers' arguments. Right? Okay, because all facts are out there in the court of law, right? But then the problem is how to interpret why is person doing these things and all this, and the interpretation of the law, whether certain case apply to this situation. It's a bore to read those the dockets, right? And sometimes you will see the indictment, right? But you have to understand the prosecutor's indictment, they are nothing but the prosecutor's case against the defendant. They are not the final ruling, right? So the indictment may say a lot of things. Like, for example, when the Mueller, the prosecution, the investigation, they produce a whole slew of indictments against some Russian operatives, against some the campaign managers in the Trump organization and all that. But they are just indictments, right? They say, oh, you're doing this. This is bad. But they not be proven guilty in the court. But the things about indictment is that they may contain facts, right? Of their criminal intent and their operations. Okay, so it may be easier to use information intermediary service in understanding these cases. So they are court reporters, right? So like, for example, financial analysts analyze financial reports, right? And they are court reporters, court journalists to read the case and read the docket and to produce the summary of it. Okay. So to present those facts, in a research, fact should be presented as from a third party. Don't use your first person voice when you're presenting the facts, right? Okay, you should be independent and you should be an uninterested observer, right? Okay, you're just reporting the facts, presenting it. And in this section, you are not asked to render your opinion. And you are not asked to judge it. You are not asked to say this is good or bad. No. In the first sections in your research paper, when you're presenting the facts, this is what you need to do. Just present the facts that are relevant, right, to your research. Do not sensationalize the fact. Do not interject one's opinion. Assume authority over the matter. Presume impacts and implications when presenting the facts. You don't need to do that. It's very, very strict, because if it's a research paper that when you are presenting the facts, you are already talking about potential impacts and all that. You just muddy the thing. Okay, don't do that. Okay, next you have to learn about is what we call the positive versus normative statements. Right, it's a big thing to know. The positive, you should always choose a positive statement over normative when you are presenting the fact. The positive here is that it's not just think that Mr. Trump's way, Oh, I test positively. No. I test negatively, but very positively. He was doing things like that, right? He cannot say things negative. Right. But the thing is about this is positive in this sense means what is. And normative means what should be. Okay? So in the research paper perspective, a positive statement, you are basically saying what is this, what is that, what happened, what did not. Okay? That's what positive mean in this sense. It does not necessarily mean good or bad. Something happened. Okay, like turn things on and off. If things are on, it's positive. Things are off, it's negative. It's in this sense, right? Doesn't mean good or bad. Right? And normative means what should be, what ought to be, good or bad, is judgmental. What should be normal, what should be not, right? And when you are presenting the fact, okay, always try to use positive statement over normative statement. You can quote somebody making a normative statement, right, as part of the facts, right? But no, when you are presenting the case, you don't need to do that, okay? So there's a place for a normative statement, but it should be a much later part of your research when you have analyzed the facts, analyzed the impact, and then it may be time for you to render your opinion onto this case. Okay? So it is very similar when you are conducting through an audit, right? First, you go out to find the facts, the audit evidence, right? You do not render any opinion yet. You're just collecting the facts, right? And then you'll analyze it later. So some general tips, keep it simple. Okay. The readers may be lost in the mess of data because the readers, unlike you, they did not spend a lot of time to go through the case. Like, for example, if you're doing some kind of research on, let's say one of you doing Logitech, right? I may have no knowledge about Logitech, right? So try to keep it simple. Okay? And the first general, then specific. Start with the information that will give the reader an idea of the matter. Focus on the representativeness of the data. Okay? And then the specificities of the particulars. Okay. And then document the collection process. It's a good practice to show the reader how, from where, and with what methodology the data and facts are collected in the method section. But why do you choose certain journal articles over the other? No. Or why do you choose, I only choose journal articles for information intermediate, secondary source. Oh, I chose for mandatory disclosure in the annual report because of this. Oh, I get the information from the court docket, right? Okay, document why. Well, how do you collect those facts, right? And then the helper. Okay. A lot of times facts are presented to you in such a way they are unorganized, right? So you may want to use tables, graphics, or even, let's say here, timeline, right? To help you read the way through the case of what happened, okay? So the group case number 1, okay, research on Theranos. I already post the research, the requirements there. You can download it, okay? So the written case, every group need to complete due on the 16th. The research paper, the requirement is written in there, 8 pages, not a lot, okay? And 8 pages, and there are 4 sections, so each section is only 2 pages. It's actually quite manageable. And you can read through the requirement yourself. And most of the stuff it's already been written on Theranos. And for example, Theranos, that's even in courts right now, right? So the group hosted discussion is on a week after that. So imagine that. When the group is hosting the discussion, every group, every one of you have already written the case. So you know what happened. You know what question to ask, right? You've seen certain aspect of the case that you may bring up to the discussion. But I want to highlight this is a discussion. So if you are presenting the case, you are hosting the discussion, you don't need to defend your own writing, right? We are just talking about this as a matter of fact. Oh, this is an interesting aspect that I found, right? And let's discuss this together. Let's discuss this together. You are hosting it, okay? You are not defending it. And this is a very important trick to learn if you're going to be an auditor in the future. A lot of times auditors, when present their audit evidence, they try to defend what they were doing. No, you just discuss as a matter of fact. I found this, they were doing that, right? Okay, the same thing here. I found this, the Theranos is doing that, right? Okay, Mr. Elizabeth Holmes, she's stealing money. And how did they do it? Right? So you may need to prepare some slides, prepare some teaching materials, some handouts, timeline that you can distribute or put it on the screen, right? And to this remote teaching sessions, it's very easy for me to give control to highlight somebody's video. Like for example, right now I can choose Jingyu, and then I can pin Jingyu's video. So when you're presenting, I can do that. It's very easy for me to do. And so you can choose someone among you to control the slides, or every one of you may control an aspect of the discussion, right? So someone may control, I'm here to talk about the facts. I'm here to talk about the implications. I'm here to talk about what happened afterwards, right? You can do it that way as well. And let me see my slides. And you may also want to prepare a list of discussion items, the things you found relevant, illuminating, to bring to the audience. And I like this word, illuminating, because that's essentially what the hosted discussion is trying to do. Okay, we try to illuminate the audience what we have found, right? And you are discussing the case. Like I said earlier, you are not defending your writing here, so no pressure. We just discuss this thing all together. So every student, since you, by the time when the host discussion is happening, you have already written the case, participated, right? And you need to prepare a discussion item, just one page, for questions and discussions, what you want to ask, what you find, what you like to discuss. And there will be a place for you to post online, and that will be part of the requirement. Okay, so I'm going to, let's take a break, and I'm going to put you guys in your own groups right now. And when you come back, you will be with your group and work on this Theranos case. And there are already quite a few things that you can do. And one of the articles that I post is a good information on where to find information on Theranos. There, what to read, what to listen to. There are podcasts. There are even movies produced in HBO on this whole case, so you can take a look at it and discuss it. It does not need to be a research paper. This is just a case study. You just present the facts, analyze it a bit, and talk about it. Okay, so let me put. So any question before I put you guys in the group? Any questions? No. I'll put you guys in the breakout room, and you may take a break when I'm doing that. And when you come back, you should be joining your own breakout room. Which one? Megan. Shit. What shit? Sorry. We do this again. Breakout room. I have to wait 30 more seconds. Sorry about that. That's fine. I'm closing it because I did something wrong when setting it up. I have to reset it. Alexander. country. Tiaxin, Anna, Sophie, and all right, so you guys can work in your group and start working on this Theranos case. And if you're done, you can just leave the class. You know, and if you have questions, I'm here. You can pop out to the public room and ask me, or ask for help in the group, and I will be able to help you. So you can take a break and come back in 10 minutes. Beep, 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 beep. No, look at that. Nothing. The puppy don't pick it up. No, that's not it. I didn't buy it. Mommy, is it equal to last time? Is it equal to last time? Ethan, is your class done? Here.
Keep out of reach of children.
Stay for that. Hey, where's that code? Not my